Knowing this near-universal pattern helps to assess new brands and existing ones.
What don't marketers know?
Quite a lot. Marketers largely live in an anything-goes world where the latest fashion or fad drives an awful lot of practice.
Segmentation is the recognition you can't serve everyone with equal satisfaction.
This is the Zac Anesbury Show.
Welcome. On today's podcast, we have Julian Major. So Julian is the head of research and insights at Visit Victoria. So I first met Julian almost 10 years ago now, when we completed a summer vacation program together. He, of course, decided to stop his academic career and pursue industry within Melbourne, Victoria. I, of course, decided to continue my academic career within Adelaide, South Australia. So it was really great to hear from him as he moved from, that research conducting role through to that research commissioning role and what it was like being on both sides of the fence. We discuss at length, I guess, somewhat unsurprisingly, the impact of COVID-19 on the tourism market. Of course, internationally, here in Australia, but also interstate and, of course, intrastate within Victoria itself. We finished the podcast with Julian giving us some timely advice for younger marketers. But I'm not going to tell you what he spoke to. You're just going to have to listen. So without further ado, Julian Major. I think we're good to go. Awesome. Welcome to the podcast, Julian. Thanks for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Zac.
So just for everyone who's listening at home, I've known Julian for quite a long time. I think I met you sort of at the tail end of my undergraduate program, just as I was entering honours, and I think you were kind of doing a summer vac with me or something like that. But you're probably the best person to introduce yourself. Did you want to give us a bit of an overview as to who you are, and then we'll start getting a bit deeper into everything that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether I should go start to finish or where I am now backwards, but I'm Julian. Currently, I'm head of consumer insights at Visit Victoria. I've been working for Visit Victoria for 3.5 years now, and really enjoy the role even during some incredibly challenging times, which I'm sure we'll cover later on. But really, I've been in a research space for my whole career. Like you say, we started our research journeys together in a way, Zac, in that summer vacation scholarship, which was super interesting. So I was doing that when I was completing my Bachelor of Marketing and Communications at UniSA. Didn't really know what I wanted to do after that. So I thought summer vacation scholarship is a good time to get experience doing different things. Really loved the research experience, and then did a Master's by Research on distinctive assets, which I found a really enjoyable experience, as well as just being at the institute, as well as writing the actual thesis itself and having experience with teaching. But after that, I sort of had a pretty good understanding that whilst I was interested in research, that sort of the academic side of things had run its course, and wanted to go into more of, using the same skills, but in a slightly different environment. And so got a job at a research agency called GFK, where I spent 3.5 years, really enjoyed it. Great company, great people, great culture. And, it's a similar story. Sometimes you enjoy one particular role, but you sort of run its course with what you can get out of it. And since then, I've moved over to Visit Victoria. So I sort of went, from now backwards back to where I am now. But is that sort of what you're after?
Yeah, definitely. So you're in, you have an interesting background. I sort of noted it before. So it's one of the offices from Visit Victoria, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's pretty cool. And so is this just one room that's like your lunchroom or an office room or something?
Oh, this room, yeah, we have lots of meeting rooms and they're all named after things to do with Victoria. So this is Hosier, named after Hosier Lane, one of the street art laneways in Melbourne, but there's a Bells Beach one, there's a coffee themed one, an MCG themed one. So yeah, one of the good things about working here is the offices are very new and the facilities are very good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I get like a bit of like a, I don't know, Adam and Eve type vibe from it, but almost like a Melbourne hipster type trend with the beard and stuff. I quite like it actually.
Yeah.
And like, at first I thought it was one of those, Zoom backgrounds that you just picked out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, this is real.
Yeah. And then I was noticing like when you were turning, you weren't getting those pixelations and all those weird things that happen. I'm like, that's a pretty cool office.
It is,
I've just moved offices. So like last time you would have saw me, I was up on level 4 and I've just moved down. I'm on level 3. It's a little bit quieter, which is kind of nice. I'm getting a lot done. And I'm in the process of getting the office renovated. So I have no posters behind me. Right. Nothing cool and exciting. I have a new couch. It's nice. It's Ehrenberg Bass Blue, so that's pretty good. But yeah, no, the campus is a lot nicer than when you were here.
I haven't really been on campus for a while, but I've come back to Adelaide every now and again, and whenever drive down North Terrace, it is pretty amazing how much has changed about the general precinct, and definitely UniSA City West looks really different. Quite jealous of what people have at the moment. Seems very fancy.
It's completely different to what we experienced early on. I don't think too many people are going to some of the coffee shops that were here before, and there's some newer sort of, I guess, more modern, more nicer coffee shops people are going to, which is good. But yeah, this whole northwest end of the city in Adelaide, it's like a medical hub. Like they have the new Royal Adelaide Hospital here. They have the SAMRI. They're building a second SAMRI, which is, that's just been approved. And just to think, like when we were here, that was nothing but a skate park and a old train railway station where they park trains overnight.
They've done a great job with that. With that area. It makes a lot of sense, and it's a genuine precinct, I suppose, of education and research.
Yeah, well, when you're in Adelaide next, let me know, because I coordinate the visitors for the Institute. So if you ever need like an office space or you want to give a presentation here or something like that, let me know.
Yeah, we'll do.
Perfect. So getting back on track. Like I said, we kind of met when we were doing our summer vacation scholarship at the time, which must have been about 10 years ago.
Yeah. If you're going to ask me any questions about that, I'm going to struggle a little bit to remember, to be honest.
The only part I remember is we were all sitting in one room, which is now one of the visitors' offices. And we were kind of sat there and we were doing our own little research projects. And I was looking at duplication of purchase sort of stuff, and no one was looking at the same thing. And it was kind of like the door would open, we'd turn around to see who was getting selected, and Jenny would come in and she'd gather you and take you away. And it was quite funny. But yeah, then we ended up, both enrolling into a Masters by Research.
Yeah.
So you ended up doing that with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. I know Professor Jenny Romanek was your supervisor. Was she your only supervisor, or did you have someone else?
Magda. Magda was my master's. Yeah.
Of course it was. Yeah, I should have revisited your thesis and had a look.
It's a good read. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, it still gets cited, so that's pretty good.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. If you have a look at some of the new Institute stuff, or we still cite some of the research that you're doing. So did you want to explain to people like what your research was about?
It's going back a fair way. My master's thesis is actually acting as a rest for my laptop at home to prop it up, because we've been working from home for so long. So I did flick it open recently because of that. My thesis was on distinctive assets. Was always really super interested in the advertising research component of marketing and what Ehrenberg Bass did, and finds, the ideas of branding super interesting, and distinctive assets, I think, was the hot topic at the time, and I think it probably still is to some respects, and still get a lot of interesting questions about distinctive assets, whether it was in my last job at a research agency across different clients or even in this current role. So yeah, I was super interested in that, general field. And my topic was around the role that distinctive assets have to play in not just as branding devices, which I think Nicole's thesis covered incredibly well, in that, they play a really good complementary role in boosting correct brand recognition. But beyond that branding role, can they play a role in being really effective attention-grabbing devices, with the idea that, there's potentially a double benefit of distinctive assets, because they can be used creatively, so they grab your attention, and they do the job of branding as well, because the brand name itself isn't something that's overly sexy. A lot of advertising agencies will have, I suppose, they're not always keen to put a lot of direct branding in, so it was sort of exploring that concept of how much do they grab people's eyes, and does that differ across the different sorts of distinctive assets that you can employ in advertising. So I think we looked at things like slogans, brands, characters. I can't recall if we did music, but I remember doing a research paper around music as a distinctive asset or a branding device. So I think we found that the answer was yes, that they can play that dual role. It's another selling point about investing long term into consistent distinctive assets, in that it's boosting your correct brand recognition, which is often a really difficult thing to move, and it's doing so because the eyes are going to the brand character more so than the brand logo, which is, I suppose, sometimes tucked away in the bottom corner at the end of an ad.
Yeah, it was it was a cool little piece of research, actually. I remember thinking you had a great topic at the time when you were doing masters.
And it was good, yeah.
That was, I think, 2011 maybe to 2013. And as you'd imagine, that's 7 more years of research and development that Jenny's undertaken. And there's a few other theses going on in the area and what other people have looked at. So I can't tell you a huge amount because I'm not part of their supervision teams. It's really not my area. But one person's looking at, the prominence of each distinctive asset on, say, a pack. And then whether that increases recall or correct brand recognition. Other people are looking at the ability or the necessity, or whether it actually occurs, of like a parent brand with sort of sub brands. So if your color is green and then you have a variant of it that's blue, what's sort of happening there? I'm not across any of the results of that research because that's Jenny's area, and I'm not so much in that research, but there's so many fantastic things that are coming out of that area, and it's really taken off. It's
fantastic.
So let's move back to you. So you did your master's by research. You decided you didn't want to do a PhD. You decided to break everyone's hearts here, including my own, and you didn't decide to stay. You left. So you said it ran its course, is how you phrased it. Was it sort of like you realized academia wasn't for you, or you thought that industry gave you something that you wanted to go into industry, then you thought you might come to academia later? Like we've heard that before when people have left. Yeah. Or was there just something, maybe you can explain it better than I can guess.
I think it's a little bit of all of those. Like with the last point, I think my mindset at the time was, if I try and make the leap elsewhere, and I find that it's not everything it's cracked up to be, and I really miss the academic side of things, that maybe you can turn course. But I was sort of always wary that maybe there is too long to stay in that sort of world, and wanted to get the experience in the commercial space a little bit earlier on. So a little bit of that, a little bit of, I think that the prospect of writing a PhD to me is really daunting. I think, writing a master's is not easy. It's a lot of hard work, some late nights. But at the end of the day, to pass a master's by research, what you primarily have to show, as you would know, is that you are capable of doing high quality research. You don't necessarily have to put new knowledge out into the world. So a lot of master's theses will be replication of other people's work under different conditions or something like that. So, my research was, relatively simple, but it shows that you can do research and literature reviews and experimental design and data analysis and all of those things to, the right level of competency for a master's by research. But the prospect of having to write something that really, tackles new ground to some extent or goes to that next level when putting new knowledge out into the world, to be honest, is a little bit daunting. And I think you have to be really committed to that. If you're going to go into it, I think, at the end of the day, if that was something I was really passionate about getting to, it would have been a great thing to do and probably could have done it, but I just didn't feel that passion to commit to 3 more years, in a way, starting the thesis project again as well, straight after you've finished a master's by research. So 5 years is a long time. And I didn't do a huge amount of commercial research whilst I was at the Institute, to be honest, but what I did do, I enjoyed. And I was, just interested to test myself in a slightly different world, whilst knowing that you're still using the same skills every day. I mean, there's commercial research opportunities at the Institute as well. Often you're tackling similar problems or research questions. So just wanted to look at it from a slightly different angle, and, was also excited about the prospect of moving outside of South Australia as well, and experiencing something different. And I knew that would be a consequence of trying to go into the commercial world, in that it is quite difficult in Adelaide to get research jobs. There's not a lot of research agencies. There's not necessarily a lot of businesses that set up shop with their headquarters in Adelaide, which you need if you want a research or insights role. So whole lot of reasons, and so that's why it was always really crystallised in my mind that that's where I wanted to ultimately go.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I mean, you made a number of really good points. I think you really nailed the difference between the difference of a master's by research and a PhD in terms of all the masters by research here, at least, are very much replication and extension type theses where we have a really good piece of knowledge and we want to know whether it holds in a new condition or for a new population or a new time period. Maybe it hasn't been done for a while and the landscape's completely changed. And so you have you then have to show your competency on those skills. Whereas for a PhD, you have to create new knowledge and contribute to the field in that way. And it's not just simply another year. So, I think, and that's the thing. It's like you knew that you had the capabilities to do it and the competency to do it, but did you really have the commitment to spend another 3 years of your life doing it? And then obviously keep going through to a postdoc position and afterwards. You made a really good point about the that year, like going from a master's by research to a PhD. That's 5 years of continuous thesis. So we've sort of moved towards a almost having like a gap year in a weird way between master's and PhD. I took one, I think Steve took one as well, and it really allowed us to decompress after that intensity of doing a thesis, focus on building other skills like publications, contract commercial research skills, and also the teaching skills that you're talking about before. We'll touch a little bit on, moving for opportunities and stuff a little bit later. So I'm glad that you flagged that. You did like tutoring while you were here, right?
Yeah, I really liked tutoring as well. I'm not sure I would say I miss it now, but for a long time I did. I really enjoyed it a lot. I thought it gave you a lot of skills that probably stick with me now, in that it's just a really unique environment to be in. You've got a room of 15 people in a class, often many of whom are quite introverted and hesitant to be the first person to put their hand up and answer questions and that sort of thing. And I would probably describe myself on slightly the introverted, I suppose, scale as well, because we're all somewhere on that line. So it's an interesting skill to try and get a room full of people motivated to, participate, because that's what a tutorial type thing is ultimately meant to be about. And, also just teaches you, I think, to be a better public speaker in a way, because, you have a broad idea of what you want to cover in that tutorial, but you don't come into that with a script or, necessarily a real clear plan, and it can go in lots of different directions depending on the questions that are asked of you. And sometimes students ask really interesting questions that throw you. So, it's interesting to say, in a way that the teaching part, taught me or developed so many skills that I find really useful in this world right now, whether that's, consulting at an agency or, being in an insights role in an organisation. But I definitely think that's the case. Didn't enjoy all the long hours marking exams. That's probably part of it that I miss less. But really enjoyed that. I can't even remember what topics I would have taught, but I remember them being really interesting ones to do as well. Often they'd have students from different background, from different degrees. So not necessarily people that were just doing a marketing and comms and were just getting a little bit of a taste of marketing as part of their broader education. So it was, really interesting to see how people would engage in it. And, for some people would really get it and really, love it. And, maybe, it helps them figure out what they want to do or what their interests are as well. So, really rewarding experience where I got a lot out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 100% agree with everything that you sort of said there. It really forces you to improve your public speaking skills and to be able to communicate something that's usually quite complex that they've learned in a lecture in a short amount of time, go through questions. And the questions that they come from the audience, you don't know what's going to come from your students. And sometimes they ask very good questions.
Yep.
And it makes you rely on your knowledge outside of that single week of the course. And I think that's really helped in all sorts of things, whether I'm giving academic presentations or like you're giving presentations to colleagues and stuff now. And it really allows you to be able to think on your feet or to not panic and freak out. Or that's really cool. You absolutely nailed everything I thought about it.
Yeah, possibly shouldn't say this. I hope none of your students listen, but even sometimes when you get good questions, sometimes you get pretty rubbish questions as well, and you can't say, no, you're an idiot. Like, what are you thinking there? And you can't say that here either. You can't say that to a brand that you're consulting for. So, really gives you good interpersonal skills, in some, tricky situations, I suppose.
Yeah. How to acknowledge what they've said without criticizing it.
Because, it has to be an open environment, and there is no such thing as, a silly question necessarily, but, some questions deserve more thought than others. Yeah.
There's a South Park quote from Mr. Garrison. I think it's like, there's no such thing as stupid questions, just stupid people.
Yeah. It's
That's obviously not true here. But every time I hear something about the silly questions, that quote just comes to mind for some reason. People come from different diverse backgrounds. And so if they're thinking purely from like a financial point of view, or, they have been taught marketing that's not from like an Arian Bergian type situation, it's like, well, they're not stupid people. And the question's not really stupid either. It's our job and maybe even your job at some point to then get them to not necessarily change the way they think, but how they understand that this concept actually works based on empirical evidence. And so I think that's quite good. So you ended up then moving from out of the university sector completely, and so you moved to GfK, which is a global company, right? But they have their Adelaide headquarters in Melbourne.
They're a global company, German-based company. Do not ask me what GfK stands for, because it is like a 20-letter word in German with the accent, and I could never fully get it right. But yeah,
that's why you were let go a few years later.
Yeah, there's a test every year, and didn't make a lot of improvement. And they have their Australian offices in Melbourne and Sydney, with the main Australian office in Sydney. So it was a very small Melbourne office. I'm not even sure how long the Melbourne office would have been in place before I arrived, but would maybe have been about 8 to 10 people over the 3.5 years that I was there, whereas the Sydney office was much bigger and had a lot of different components to it as a business. So we were on the I suppose sort of consumer research side of things, ad tracking, brand tracking, custom projects, traditional market research, whereas GfK also had another arm around point of sales tracking for consumer electronics. So they sort of, work as, an aggregator in the same way that I suppose Nielsen will do it in other categories around the world. So it was a really interesting company to join because it's definitely a global company, but you're in a small Melbourne office, but you're also attached to an organisation that does a lot of different things in Australia. So, learnt a lot out of that.
Yeah, so you started off as a research executive, got promoted to senior research executive pretty quickly, then got promoted to research manager pretty quickly, then you're a research director pretty quickly, all of that in the space of, I think, roughly 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's good about being in an agency environment, and I've obviously only experienced it at a research agency, but it's probably true of ad agencies or media agencies or, digital specialist agencies. You get opportunities very quickly to progress. And, in some ways, often you do get thrown in the deep end with the right amount of support. And if you do a good job in stretching your skills and being given more responsibility, everyone's happy. And often in an agency environment, you are rewarded quite quickly for doing things because you can really show the tangible impact that you're having on that business, particularly when you're involved in, quite a small agency where, in the Melbourne office, everyone is broadly aware of what everyone is working on, even if you're not on the same accounts. We all understand how the revenue is going for the year, how our existing clients, whether they're happy or not, whether we're winning new business. So I think that's really, why you can do something like that in an agency environment. It's really fast paced. You're given a lot of responsibility early. And if you grab that, you're sort of rewarded for it.
Yeah, well, good on you for grabbing it and running with it. So, because I have not worked for an agency, right? And maybe people who are listening to this podcast are either in an academic world or haven't worked for a research agency in particular. Did you want to explain each of the roles, what they meant for you in a daily environment, how you managed to succeed so well to get to the next one, and then the new responsibilities, if that kind of makes sense? So moving from research executive, what your day would be like, responsibilities, how you obviously did very well at it, got promoted, and then just keep.
Yeah. So, I mean, you come in as a research executive, which is, really saying that you're someone that is a sort of a doer. So, a research executive's role in a research agency will be sort of a lot of the early start of a job. It might be, updating a lot of charts. It might be editing or proofing questionnaires or proofing proposal documents, but that's sort of your, line of responsibility. Having a certain, really specific role to play in larger projects, and it's usually, those tasks like, updating, lengthy, reports or running data requests and that sort of stuff. And, I won't necessarily go through the what is a senior research executive or manager and director, because it is a little bit subjective, and I suppose those terms in a way aren't necessarily equivalent across every research agency in the world, or certain things. Director can often mean quite a different thing in ad agency world than it means in certain research agencies. Terminology of job titles is a little bit of a messy space at the moment. Maybe 40 years ago it was a little bit simpler, but basically you get given more responsibility over time. So as a research executive, you might not even be invited along to client presentations, or you might be invited along just because you've run a lot of data. And so if there's a tricky question that the account lead doesn't know the answer to, they can sort of throw to you, but you're sort of just there to observe or support if really needed. Whereas, a senior research executive might play a bigger role with report writing. They might also be brought along to more presentations where they're given, opportunities to speak. The move to a manager, I would say, is quite significant, because often that means you're charged with sort of the end-to-end delivery of a project. And so you need to make sure that runs smoothly. You need to, I suppose, work with executives who are charting the report, make sure that it's all going well from like a real project management perspective. And, when you're at that sort of level, often you're taking the lead with, talking to clients, picking up the phone, answering their questions, going to presentations, that sort of thing. Okay. Then when you get to sort of director level, you play a bigger role in new business development, basically. And that's where I sort of got to my final stage at GfK, and I thought I had run my course really at a research agency environment.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you made the most of it, where you had increasing levels of responsibility, and then the tasks obviously changed. And I think that probably meant it was more stimulating for you, and I think growing. Would hate to work at a place where you stopped growing and developing. So this place is very challenging every day. As you imagine.
And what I loved about that role, particularly in that sort of manager type level, is being in those interesting conversations directly with the client, hearing the challenges that they have, hearing why they want to use that research, again answering some really tricky questions that they may have. I like that intellectual challenge, and I think people in research roles are so lucky to have that as a job, where it's about learning and answering questions every day, and it's not monotonous. Whereas you can only be a research executive and update a lot of charts so many times.
Yeah. Oh, do you remember any particular curly questions that you got thrown, and one that you had maybe an awesome answer for, or one that you were just like, oh?
I'd probably...
don't have to name clients, obviously.
No, I'd probably have... I think, sometimes there are just questions that are so big that a research agency can't necessarily answer them. And I think that's also a skill to say, to know when to try and attempt to answer a question versus when to say, what, I don't know, or this is, too big of a question, or what you're asking is something that the advertising industry has been struggling with for decades, and I'm, not going to get into that. So I think that's a skill as well. I think... that's always a quote that I remember from the Institute as well. It was like one of those rules. I think it's from the Institute. It was like, don't argue back unless you really know what the answer is, or you know what you're talking about. And I think, so I can't remember a specific one that really stumped me, but I remember there are times when, when you're getting questions on the spot, that's what you're thinking of, do I try and get an answer? Do I argue back if they're really challenging me, or do you say, what, I don't know, because sometimes that's the right answer.
I think that, that's a huge point. You're thinking of the 13 golden rules of presenting.
Yes.
Yeah, I just gave that to a bunch of about 10
Yeah.
the new summer vacation. We're calling them scientists now, summer vacation scientists.
Yep. Yep. That's good.
So gave them to them. They had to give 5 presentations over the course of 6 weeks. And so, yeah, we gave them that. So it's really interesting that, 8 years later, they still stick with you. I'm going to tell them that.
That one I definitely remember. I'm not sure, is the don't start with an apology one of those, or is that
That's the first one?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I feel sometimes you do have to. So if you're really late to a meeting, I feel like, and you're taking the piss with how late you are, and but you got to do it quickly. You got to say, all right, sorry, I'm late, bang, cut into it.
Straight into it.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think that's a bad habit that people have in general, apologising for things. Yeah, Australians are too polite sometimes, I think. Yeah.
You're probably only more polited by the Canadians.
Yeah.
Well, that's their, I don't know how you would like, cliche.
Yeah. I mean, we say sorry when we're not sorry. We just say it as a thing to say. It's just become part of our things that we do.
It's a full stop now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really kind of cool. So, I ran into someone who used to work with you. She was a big fan. She works at Mars now.
Yeah, Sam Hogan.
No, Sam, but she was, I think, probably slightly older than Sam, and brunette.
Mars. Why am I blanking on her?
I've only met her once. So I'm sure it'll come to you. She obviously doesn't work at GFK either, but similar to you, she had nothing but good things to say about them. And I think what's really interesting is GFK picked up, I think after you, they picked up Juan.
Yes.
They picked up John and Taylor at some point as well, right?
Just Taylor, not John.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was that just the 3 or?
That was the 3.
So Taylor ruined it for everyone else afterwards.
I left slightly after Taylor arrives, actually. And I don't think they've made any Ehrenberg Bass hires since. But, it's interesting. Ehrenberg Bass has such a high profile.
Okay.
I think when I came into GFK, and interviewed, they probably saw it as a positive. We're hearing all about this Ehrenberg Bass stuff, and maybe a couple of clients have mentioned it, and they see it as positive to bring someone with a different lens of thinking. And I think in general, the institute just creates really good researchers. It attracts people with a certain work ethic and willingness to learn. So. Juan was great to work with at GFK when we were both there. And briefly at GFK, the CEO of the Australian office was an Ehrenberg Bass. I'm not even sure if it was called Ehrenberg Bass then, but an alumni as well.
Right.
So Catherine Eddy was quite a long time ago attached to UniSA and the institute. So it was great to learn a couple of things from her as well.
Yeah, it was Marketing Science Centre before that. Hence the marketingscience.info website, hence the marketing science titles.
Should update that.
It all flows. I like to take credit. I created the Summer Vacation Scientist title, but I like to take credit for creating SMS as well, like Senior Marketing Scientist.
Right.
It was Senior Research Associate, then it was Senior Marketing Researcher. There was about 6 months where it changed a couple of times, and I'm like, no, everything needs to be tied into marketing science because we're marketingscience.info, and it stuck.
I mean, job titles are important. They should reflect what you do and how you want to be perceived. So that's a good idea.
Oh, I like to take credit for it. Someone else will probably argue that they made it up, but who knows? So you're like, okay, I've had enough with the research provider side of things. And now you're with Visit Victoria. So you're more on the commissioning research side of things. Is that right? Or
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And your role started with, I've got a list here, Consumer Insights Executive, then you moved to Head of Research and Insights.
Yes.
Yeah. What's it like being on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what led me to that decision as well and desire to be on the side of the fence was, I really liked being at the research agency environment, but you get to a point where you have to choose a path within that world.
Okay.
And broadly speaking, I would say the two paths are you're good at sales, you're good at selling new work, and really making sure the revenue line is healthy in the business, so some sort of business development role, or you could become really a specialist in a certain type of research. So I'm the advertising effectiveness specialist, or I am the guy that you go to for pricing issues, or whatever like that. And I sort of didn't see myself fitting nicely into either of those two streams. I definitely am not the sort of person that can be good in a sales role, and I just didn't like the idea of really pinning myself down to one sort of specialist research area, particularly at this at that stage of my career. So I thought of staying in a research agency environment would have been nice, but I feel that you would have got diminishing returns on how much you're learning, and it would have been sort of getting into the routine of doing the same things, unless you really want to push hard into one of those two areas. So yeah, the opportunity came up at Visit Victoria. Had a little bit of experience in the tourism world. Tourism Australia was a client for some time during my time at GFK, and so I worked with their research team there. So I really liked the, I suppose, product category of tourism. Found it super interesting, and such a unique space, being attached to a sort of a destination marketing organisation, and yeah, it came in at an interesting time for the organisation. So I came in when there was no one else in the consumer insights team. My predecessor had left for another opportunity in the Victorian government, and it took them a while to hire someone new for that role. So I don't recommend starting a new job when there's no formal handover period, but I suppose that in itself is a really good learning exercise, and breeds a certain resilience in you. And it's sometimes you need that shock challenge, particularly when you feel like you've been at a certain pace and been in a really comfortable environment where you're really confident in what you're doing all the time at GFK. So came in, the team doubled to 2, finally got someone else in that team, and just moved up to the head of, it's recently been a job title change, consumer insights to research and insights, moved up into that head of position. It's the same thing, just a change of title to better reflect what we do. But yeah, it's such a fantastic place to work. It's different every day. And what I like most about being on this side of the fence is that you can really see the outcome of your work, or you can not even that, you can see the cog that research plays in the wheel of the organisation more holistically. So you're just one part of something that feeds into, that informs this, which leads to this, which has that sort of outcome. And at an agency, you do have good relationships with your clients, but there's always you will always miss certain context of what the research is being used for, and the other things that are going on at the organisation at the time. So I like being in the inner circle, rather than just doing a piece of work and delivering it and saying, yep, good job sort of thing. The job never ends here. And the one interesting thing about it is you really need to enjoy the sort of work that the organisation does, because it's your life day in, day out. Sometimes at a research agency, you'll get some clients that are like, this is the most boring product category, or this sort of work is not the most exciting. If you weren't interested in tourism, or you went to an organisation that sold toilet paper or whatever, that could be really interesting. But if you don't find it interesting, it's going to get old quickly, because you live and breathe that product category and that work every day. So yeah, that's sort of why I wanted to move over, to see, and to work with people who aren't just research people at the end of the day. That's a good thing about being in a research agency, that camaraderie of you're all doing the same thing, all working to the same goal to try and grow your research agency, hire more people, do good work. You all know what good work is. You all know what bad work is. Whereas on this side of the fence, you're working with people who acquire major events, people who do marketing campaigns, people who do, cooperative marketing, business events is another arm of Visit Victoria. So, you get to see what so many really smart people do day to day, and, think about, how can what I do help them do their job better ultimately, or, create better outcomes.
Yeah, I'm a South Australian, so I know Tourism SA, and I mean, yeah, I don't know much about Vic, Visit Victoria or anything. Chris Villani, who you know as well, he worked for the equivalent in Sydney, didn't he? Or
Destination New South Wales. Yeah. Do
you see them as competitors?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And it's really interesting, I suppose, depending on what sort of business unit you work in. So I think there's elements that are highly competitive, and areas that are incredibly commercial in confidence. So I know all the researchers at all the other states, and there are, certain things that even if they're cheeky and ask you a question, you say, "Why, I'm not answering that." That's you'll have to wait and see what we do, sort of thing. But there are some areas where collaboration and cooperation is really beneficial for us all as a whole. So there are a number of research projects that we do which has sort of like a federal state funding model, and it primarily works in international tourism, because if we know more people come to Australia, then yes, there's a competitive job to be done in making sure that Victoria is on the list, or New South Wales is on the list, but there's an element of everyone will win to some degree if international tourism does really well. And from a research perspective, it just makes a lot of sense to pool our resources in that area, whereas the most competitive market would be interstate tourism, for sure, because there's limited number of people. People don't do multi-state journeys like they do in international, so it's a finite market, and you're trying to gain market share and do the most effective work. Whereas international, I would say, is one area where we collaborate the most. And there are also some areas where we get together twice a year as part of a research committee with Tourism Australia, the States, Tourism Research Australia, the ABS. There's benefits in us all collaborating on those national pieces of research and making sure that they're as good as they can be, and we're sharing knowledge so that anything that is done at that national level is informed by our experiences as states. But yeah, it's a unique environment in that sometimes, even though we are competitors, you do have to collaborate and talk to each other, and they're all lovely people from a research perspective, which is great. Don't deal as much with the marketing teams and the others, so I can't speak for that. But researchers tend to be quite friendly people, and the nature of your work brings you together, I suppose. Yeah,
that's awesome. I have no idea it worked like that, and I don't think a lot of people would. And it kind of makes a lot of sense, because Australia, we're competing internationally against other places, other countries essentially, and then almost blocks of countries when you think of Europe or Asia, for example. If you're doing an Asia trip, it's not unheard of to go from Malaysia and then going to Singapore, for example, because they're sort of neighboring countries, or you almost kind of see the US as, multiple states, but you'll go there and people don't usually just go to one, I'd assume. So you're kind of competing, and so you're kind of pooling those resources together, but then you're then competing, competing against everyone else, but then you're competing against your collaborators.
Definitely. And, just because more people come to Australia, it doesn't mean that those visitors are divvied up as what market share is right now. So, 5 or 10 years ago, Victoria was number 3 in terms of international visitation and expenditure behind both New South Wales and Queensland. And we've since overtaken Queensland to be number 2. And, it is a market that can change under the right conditions as well, particularly with something like aviation access being such a large driver of what gets people to, go to your state first of all, and then, stay longer. If you can get more direct flights, people will take those direct flight options and stay a longer part of their trip in your destination. So it is a really weird thing of, there's a benefit if more people come to Australia, but it's still competitive, and post-COVID it's going to be more competitive, because how rare would it be in any product category where your market essentially goes to zero and you have to restart again? And, every state is going to see that as an opportunity to say, the old world is out. We want to come back as the biggest, or we want to come back not in the position that we were before, but bigger than ever. And that's going to be a trend that you're going to see around the world as well. In that there's, destinations that have really struggled and seen the impact of not having tourism, and they're going to go hard when the planes start flying, and when there's a finite pool of international travellers.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with you completely. It'd be interesting to see how that does take effect, and then if and how long it does take to revert back to the old way. Like, so if I was to get on a plane, and this is just anecdotal thinking, but if I was to get on a plane, unless I had a vaccine that I knew was effective, I wouldn't be going to New York City, because was a bit of a hotspot, or, Los Angeles or Barcelona or London, or any of these places that are massive international household names of everyone who's pretty much alive. But I'd be considering going to some small island nations that are around Australia that haven't been impacted by COVID as much, and are probably more safe destinations. And so you think market share will change in the short term. But I do wonder whether it's kind of like the case of, you have some food poisoning from like a local bakery, or some frozen berries or something, and it's a short-term hit. And then repertoire buying and habitual behaviour kicks back into gear, and normal behaviour occurs. Like, how long until, say, I don't know, what's the number one international destination, do you know? You might know.
The number one, it would depend on how you define it as well. So it would be an Asian hub destination, just because of
probably Singapore or
Singapore per capita,
Dubai or something. But how many people who leave the airport?
Thailand would be high up there in terms of international visitation. Bangkok is a hub. It's in Southeast Asia, around highly populated areas, and it's a popular holiday destination. But I think you're right. It's an interesting question. It's like the whole, Samsung, their phone setting on fire sort of thing. They're still pretty big, and that was forgotten pretty quickly. But I think safety and security has always been the number one consideration on people's minds when they're picking a destination. And Australia's always been perceived really strongly on that. And the research that we're seeing at the moment is that has increased in perception. And it's probably the case as well for a lot of destinations that have either handled COVID well, or in general have this perception of being having lots of wide open spaces and nature, like places like Canada and Australia. So I think there's a benefit in that, but you definitely can't rest on your laurels, I suppose, because yes, the US and the UK are in a really precarious situation at the moment in regards to COVID, but they are very appealing holiday destinations, and there will be a time where you can go there, and sometimes people are easy to people forget quite easily. So I think there's a little bit of truth in both of what you said. It's not one or the other.
So there's probably a short-term change, maybe long-term revert back, and then it'd be interesting to see what happens. I think it's rather cool because it's a real-world experiment on a global level. You're not going to get a bigger sample size than this.
No, yeah, it's going to be, this is all happening at a time where our access to data and information is so much better.
Yeah.
So the evaluation of what has happened over this period, not just from a tourism perspective, but a health perspective, and all sorts of different angles and all sorts of different product categories have been affected. There's going to be some good research after the fact, I suppose, in what all of this has done. But all the forecasts that we're seeing are saying the travel won't get back to its baseline levels of pre-COVID till 2024. So,
wow.
Recovery is a long-term game at this point. That's the forecast. Things can change pretty quickly. There are some people that would be a lot more optimistic than that, but recovery will take some time. It's such an unusual situation. Whilst COVID has affected other categories, very few have been taken down to zero in terms of international visitation to us in New Zealand, and quite a lot of other countries are having to do similar things as well. So really, interesting times ahead.
I think it's, and like you said, the market went to zero. The Australian government made a decision to shut international borders, and a lot of this is for the Australian audience, I suppose, and maybe international who don't know, a lot of our state premiers who control the borders. Did you know the premiers controlled the borders before this?
No, I didn't really, to be honest.
I didn't either,
Yeah, and it's something that would differ country to country. My understanding is it's either not possible in the US to do that, or it's really, really difficult, and the people wouldn't accept it. But you learn something new.
I had no idea. At his will, Stephen Marshall, who's the South Australian government premier, could be like, no one from here or there or anywhere can come, and I think people can leave, but they just couldn't come back. I had no idea they could do that. That's pretty interesting. But what was I saying? What were we talking about just before that? I got a bit diverted.
I can't remember. It's happened before, though.
It's all changed. Oh, has it?
Yeah, Spanish flu, they did the same thing. Australia shut its borders, which, access was quite different as opposed to huge planes coming in every day. But international borders were shut and some state borders were as well. It's interesting that's our best case study going back 100 years, but just think, and that reflected on the financial markets. Like back in March, Qantas, which is over 100 years old now as an airline. I think I really enjoy it. I know some people don't like Qantas flights. I quite enjoy the service, and their share price was sitting around $7.50 a share. And within about a week or so, I can't exactly remember the dates, but the lowest point I saw it reach was $2.02. And this was right when numbers were getting worse in the US and things weren't looking as good. We had bigger lockdowns in Australia. And now I think they're sitting at about $5.50. And the international market has not even opened up. I think that's crazy. I think that does talk to, even though we say things like, the market might not be at base levels until 2024, that might come across as, pessimistic. But, at the end of the day, travel before this was a category that had just been growing year on year. I think Australia had about 15 consecutive years of growth in international visitation, despite the fact that Australians could travel outbound with cheaper and cheaper options and more options available to them, and they were doing that. Despite that, domestic tourism was always growing, not at the same rate, but still being a solid performer over a long period of time. So, Australia is a popular destination to come to, and Australians love travelling themselves, and that desire, that underlying, what I would call a need, is not going to go away. A lot of people, even though travel is discretionary expenditure, a lot of people don't consider it that way. They consider it something that, is more important to them. It's really important for people's, I don't think it's necessarily overstating it to say it's important for people's mental health to be able to get away, to spend quality time with their friends and family. So I think there's going to be a lot of pent-up demands when borders open, when more options open up to people. And Qantas is strong enough of an airline to get through this as well. Not all of them will be. Hopefully we all get past this, and, aviation's a big employer. Hotels are a big employer. There's a lot of businesses that, are really doing it tough at the moment. So hopefully when we're vaccinated and safe to travel, we benefit from it, and, jobs come back and the market comes back strongly.
Yeah, I actually quite agree with you. I feel there will be a built-up, pent-up demand. I know it's been a little bit different for you in Victoria, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So we've spoken a lot about international travel and interstate travel. And because our Premier, it's very risky as to whether any of the Premiers are going to kick you out of their state or lock down their own. I've been a bit hesitant to do interstate travel. So I've done a lot of, it's referred to as intrastate travel. So in South Australia, the big destinations for us are Kangaroo Island. We did like the Mount Gambier sort of Coonawarra sort of regions as well. And I also did Flinders Ranges, which if no one has been to, is freaking stunning. It's pretty cool. You can climb something called St. Mary's Peak. It's like the 9th highest peak in South Australia, unless you head closer to the Northern Territory border. And it's also one of the only ones that you can climb without permission from the local Aboriginal population there. It is absolutely glorious to get to that high point, sit there. We just had a sandwich as we sat there and relaxed, and I would recommend it to absolutely everyone. But now I'm thinking, okay, the only other places I can go to are like head to Whyalla, then go further south and go to Port Lincoln. And I don't know when I'll do that, but I need to maybe look at the South Australian Tourism website. I need to find more things to do in my own state. How's that been for Victoria? Because I know you guys obviously had the bigger lockdown. So that's hurt every possible facet of tourism. Now that you're out of lockdown, and for those listening, I think it was about 120-ish days.
About that.
Where you pretty much couldn't move 5 kilometers from your house, and you were only allowed 1 hour outside to get a little bit of exercise and food.
Essentials. Doctors' appointments,
essentials.
Stuff like that.
And to your credit, you guys did a very, very good job. And now you have pretty much what the rest of the country has, which is sporadic outbreaks, which we all managed to contain pretty well because of contact tracing. How's that impacted intra-tourism beyond the obvious of none of it occurred for 120 days?
I think it created a lot of pent-up demand. It's such a unique situation to be in that tourism is defined by the distance that you move. So there are clear definitions of when you're a tourist and when you're not, and you couldn't go 5Ks from home during the second lockdown in Melbourne, which is not tourism no matter what you're doing in that 5Ks. So everything did ground to a halt, and really tricky situation to be in from a destination marketing perspective, knowing that you can't promote travel because it can't happen. But we definitely did all we could to keep that destination messaging going throughout that for...
So you're still advertising during that time?
So what we did was a campaign encouraging people to shop locally from businesses that are typically tourism businesses. So you can't go to a winery, but you can order a box of wine from, a quality winery in the state. And we have great producers and makers.
Oh, you have world-class
across,
producers, yeah.
yeah, whether it's honey, I got a lot of good artisan butter, which I highly recommend buying good
Cool.
quality butter. So we teamed up with a lot of
That sounds like such a Melbourne thing to do. We have artisan butter, none of this like meadow lee for us.
Yeah. So, and what was good about that was it was still a tourism campaign, whilst clearly it's not telling people to travel.
Yeah.
And a lot of the platforms that we were promoting were, talking about where the produce comes from. We used it as an opportunity to tell local stories about communities and makers within that. And, it really, it potentially opens people up to, places they haven't been before. So, I've never been to the high country, but I'm buying some craft beer from this, amazing brewery, and, it looks fantastic. I can't go there now, but I'll buy a 6-pack and maybe I'll visit after. So, I mean, that was something that I think everyone here is quite proud of. A lot of sales were made. It was, I think, a really important, way to support, the visitor economy during that period. But, so we tried to keep that destination message going, and we knew throughout that period there was a lot of pent-up demand for travel. People wanted to do the right thing, and they did, and the second wave dissipated. But as soon as that's what we call the steel wall of the divide between Melbourne and regional Victoria, as soon as those movement restrictions came off, there was a lot of interest in particularly in getting out to the regions. So that sort of really kicked up the second week of November for us. Okay. It was a unique situation for Victoria because we came out of our lockdown in a traditional peak period for tourism. So you already had a fantastic time to travel, which people were used to travelling in, and people had been in their homes for 4 or so months in, when you think about Victoria, primarily metro-based environments, the prospect of getting in your car, getting out to nature, experiencing something new, even, just spending, even though you've spent a lot of time with your direct family, spending quality time from them away, it's very different. So definitely the regions had a good period over Christmas, and I think we're really optimistic about the interstate market for some time. It's been a resilient market for a while. It's been one that we've invested more and more into promoting, but we think it's going to be a really strong year. And it is the whole, I suppose, the silver lining of the pandemic is it's, like you say, it's opening people's minds up to exploring more of their own backyard. At the moment, that's primarily within your own state, but most states in Australia have a lot to offer, and very few people have been to all areas of their state. And even if you've been to an area of their state, the product and the experiences are, ever evolving. And, there's a lot of destinations that are great to go back from a repeat visitation perspective. So, I think you're right. I think the interstate market's going to be a lot more challenging. And, before this situation with border changes happened, the interstate market was really in its infancy of recovering. So I think that's going to take some time, and it's going to be dependent on a lot of external factors. I think people still want to do the things interstate. That underlying desire is there, but of course, those rational factors are going to override that if there's market uncertainty. But I think it's going to be a really good year for interstate tourism, and that's great for the regions. So the regions get about 80% of their visitation on average, depends on what region, through the interstate market. The biggest part of that is Melburnians. You can get regional Victorians also going to other areas of the state, but you've got a state with 5 million Melburnians who are hungry to travel, who want to experience something new. You can't go overseas, so it's a great opportunity for destinations to present themselves differently, for, individual experiences, who may have had a lot of international visitation, to think about their offering slightly different for a local market and, potentially benefit as much as they can from, the changing consumer behaviour.
Yeah, exactly. Did you want to give a bit of a, I suppose, shout out to some of the stuff in Victoria? Like when I visit Victoria, it's mostly for work. So I'm usually in the CBD and I see all these nice cafes and restaurants and it's world famous, the food and coffee scene in Melbourne. The only stuff I know really outside in the regions is the Grampians, because I like wine and I know you have other wine regions and stuff like that. But what are the things that someone like me and a lot of other people that are really like just fantastic destinations that we should be visiting in 2021?
Yeah, I mean, we have we group our state up into tourism regions, and there's 11 of those, and each of them has a unique product offering and even its own individual personality and feel, I suppose. We have beautiful coastal regions. Obviously, I would say our most famous region from an Australian perspective is the Great Ocean
of
Road.
Course. How did I forget that?
But also have beautiful coastal areas in Gippsland, the Mornington Peninsula. We have, great wine regions that have fantastic food offerings as well, in places like the Yarra Valley.
Yes.
I think what separates Victoria from somewhere like South Australia is that we have a lot of really interesting, relatively larger sized towns. So places like Ballarat and Bendigo, I would really recommend. I can't name the population off the top of my head, but it would be quite sizable. So they have, fantastic food scenes, but it's slightly different to, the CBD environments. They have really cool regional art galleries. So it's an incredibly diverse state. Daylesford, I would recommend the most natural hot springs in Australia, located within that region. And a lot of regions that have, I suppose, like what we'd call big nature experiences. So Grampians is a great example of that, close to the South Australian border. So, you can always travel back quite quickly if you're a bit nervous about that, but still want to experience what Victoria has to offer. And Gippsland is a region that we're promoting as well a lot. So I think people forget, but it's really been a double crisis for some regions, and that you've had the bushfires. So, that was really tough, not just from a tourism perspective, but that impacted Gippsland and the high country. And those are areas that we're really dialing up in our marketing. We definitely want people to explore all of Victoria, but those are two regions that have been hit with that double whammy. And all the data that we're seeing and the anecdotal feedback is that, people do want to support those regions. They are getting back there. So I could probably go all day with that. And Melbourne's great as well. I think, Melbourne is a region that's going to, that is probably in a unique situation relative to regional Victoria, in that no international visitors and less interstate visitors impacts Melbourne the most. But, the city has a lot to offer, and it's not just the CBD. I would say, Zac, if you come down next time, get out into some of the interesting suburbs and neighbourhoods and precincts that we
show me around. I'd love to.
Yep, get down to trendy Fitzroy, or venture out a bit more and go down to Footscray. Very multicultural, fantastic food options, fantastic cultural experiences. So I think Victoria is an interesting state. It's the smallest state in Australia, so it's very compact, and there's just so much diversity and experience across the state. And that would be true of any state. And it's great that people are exploring their own backyard and wanting, they get something out of it as a traveller, and they know they're supporting their local community and supporting businesses that otherwise would be really hurting without international visitors.
Yeah, I'd love to see like the suburbs surrounding Melbourne as well. Normally when I'm there for work, you know, with Adelaide, you're on the red-eye flight and then you're catching like a 7 or 8 p.m. flight back to Adelaide after your presentation. And yeah, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in between. I'll have to try to slot in, try to get everyone to get me there on a Friday for a presentation, and then spend
an extra
weekend.
day. Yeah, we call it pleasure. So mixing business with pleasure, tack on an extra day, and you know, an interesting trend that might pop up in 2021 is we've now learned that we can work remotely.
Yeah.
So you know, a great way to potentially extend your trip is to say, you know, I'll go to regional Victoria and, you know, work from the hotel or work from the Airbnb, and I'll still be able to go out at night. I'll be able to extend my trip, and potentially that might be a trend that we see from an international tourism perspective as well. There's, you know, we can work it's a very biased white collar perspective, but a lot of people can work from anywhere, and we've learnt how to do that. So thankfully we have high speed internet at the moment. Yes,
and we can speak to anyone anywhere in the world instantly in high definition. It's crazy.
Well,
for the people that we work with anyway. I think that's pretty cool in terms of the way I think the world is going to operate for tourism. We've had a similar thing with KI and so Kangaroo Island and Adelaide Hills. We had those same fires, and there's a lot of support from like South Australians to be like, all right, we're going to go to these wineries and these small producers in the Adelaide Hills, and we're going to support them, and we're going to buy like Kangaroo Island Distillery, like their spirits, their gin. I think their gin's quite good. And they have like honey and stuff there as well. And then it was like, then COVID hit, and then everyone's like, oh, we can't just support you guys. Like, we're all in trouble now. So yeah, they got double hit, unfortunately. And for them, in some way, it was kind of lucky. There was a little bit of a grace period where we could support them before everyone kind of needed support again.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Hopefully this year's a little bit not bushfire free.
Yes.
So I want to talk about, so you're obviously the head of research and insights for Visit Victoria. So I wanted to talk to you. So you do operate in the advertising space and how you measure it. Yeah. So what are the key measures that you're interested in from like your campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, from I suppose it depends on what angle you're looking at it through. I think the good thing about being at Visit Victoria is there's a lot of very smart marketing people here, and quite knowledgeable about Ehrenberg Bass principles, and also our media agency has quite a good relationship, I believe, with Ehrenberg Bass with MediaCom. So I would say, you know, one of the key things that we want to do from an advertising perspective is reach a lot of people, and it's incredibly relevant from a tourism perspective. We work in a mass category, the same rules of, the importance of light buyers, those same principles exist for us. So, understanding how to reach a lot of people is really important for us from a consumer research perspective. Having communications that are, really distinctive is really important and hugely challenging in the destination marketing space. There's a lot of tourism imagery that is very appealing, so I don't want to seem like I'm dismissive of it, but there's a lot of beaches with, aqua blue sort of water. There's a lot of, I suppose, similar imagery and similar styles that have become destination marketing tropes. And, that's not what we want to be as Melbourne and as Victoria. We want to be really distinctive, and, for people to see our work and immediately know that is not Visit Victoria, that is Melbourne, that is, distinctively, the Victorian brand. So reach a lot of people with distinctive communications, and, talk to people about the experiences that they want to at that particular time. So so we do a lot of work around what people travel for, what experiences are trending, how to cut through. But it's not rocket science at the end of the day. Reach a lot of people with effective advertising.
Yeah. So just getting a little bit deeper into that. So let's say, for example, you've reached 40% of, you're looking at intrastate travel at the moment, potentially for the next 3 months. I don't know. I'm just hypothetically. And you want to know what is my reach of the Victorian population. And how do you know whether that reach is effective or not? So how do you then determine whether they can, I don't want to prompt you too much, I suppose.
So what were you going to say? Sorry.
Oh, how do you know whether they so they've seen an ad, they recognize it, they're like, oh, that's definitely a tourism ad, or I've seen this ad. How do you know that they know it's for potentially the region that you're advertising or for Visit Victoria?
So we run. The reach question is really interesting, because I suppose media measurement has never been more difficult with the fragmentation of so many different media types. We still have things like linear TV that are incredibly important and popular and good ways to reach a large amount of consumers. But television as a category is more fragmented now. You've got connected TV and catch-up TV and streaming video on demand, and a lot of things changing in that category. So our media agency, I suppose, and all media agencies have a lot of challenges in trying to understand the best way to reach the most people, and having that reach and frequency balance really right. But because we really talk about the importance of fully integrated campaigns here, we have to run a lot of our own market research studies to understand that, not just that we have bought, X amount of impressions or TARPs or, whatever it is, but that's actually cutting through to recall or recognition, and that for the people that have that recognition, is the brand actually cutting through, and those sort of distinctiveness or branding metrics are, something that we think we can really control and constantly improve on. So we often have to run our own research studies to sort of broadly gauge, are we on the right track with this campaign? Is it doing those reach jobs, those distinctiveness jobs? Is the message cutting through? And a lot of other things like brand lift studies that you'll do through, particular channels. But the difficult thing with that is we know people can see destination. We don't just work with one media provider. Campaigns work best when they're integrated and when you have all the media working together. So that's why we do a lot of those campaign tracking studies, what we call. But yeah. So I guess two questions. So say you've used an integrated campaign and you've got a television ad that you're streaming, and do you know whether someone has recognized that ad? How do you tell whether they've recognized it from channel 10 or channel 9, or is it just television? But what about if that ad is also on YouTube at the same time and they've seen it on YouTube? How do you know whether they've seen it on YouTube or television? How do you try to figure that out? Yeah, and I mean, that's what a lot of brand lift studies will try to do. So, there'll be, opportunities for those media channels to run surveys. They know who's been exposed to their ads. They know who hasn't been exposed to their ads. But at the same time, you could have seen that or similar pieces of communication across other media channels. So, those more granular questions, they're impossible to get from a survey environment. It's I would argue pointless even asking people, did you see this on catch-up versus linear TV, let alone the exact spot or the exact channels. So you have to figure out other ways to answer those questions. Brands lift sort of things are a part of that, but it's still there's still flaws with that methodology as well. It's a tricky world, ad measurement.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is very tricky, and also so we both know that you would know because you're very well immersed in the Ehrenberg Institute. So the greatest effect on sales probability is the first time you hit a consumer, and the second time it's obviously
Natural
increases,
returns.
but it's not that linear path forward. So you obviously want to minimize frequency, which is basically you want to minimize duplicated reach. How do you account for duplicated reach? If you're getting, I'm not sure what Mediacom does with you, but if you're getting, here are my television stats, here are my owned Facebook stats, here are my earned Facebook stats because I'm paying for it. Paid versus owned. Do you account for things like word of mouth? And then how do you do all your duplication stuff for that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that work comes from a media planning level, with, Mediacom really analysing whatever sort of like single source data that they have available to understand, audience overlaps. I'm sure there's ways to do that from a digital perspective as well, understanding how much certain channels overlap with others. But I suppose there's whilst there are scientific things that you can do within that, I suppose it's an art trying to develop a media plan that, has that right balance of reach and frequency. And, part of the role, I suppose, is also ensuring that the media types are working together. It's not always bad to have some frequency as long as it's not the same thing trying to do the same job. I don't think it's a bad thing if people see our TVC and then see some cooperative marketing that we'll do with an airline trying to sell tickets, for example. So they're both doing different jobs. They're both under an integrated campaign with the same look and feel. So I suppose it's about understanding how media channels work together, and for each media channel that you have in the mix, trying to do something that with the evidence that you have available, which is all nothing's perfect, that you're not going to have a high frequency approach.
Just my last question on that sort of stuff is, so say you know that you have 20% reach from television and then 10% reach from your Facebook. How do you account for the quality differences of them, right? So one of them is potentially it's a 30-second ad, and Facebook, some of their measures are, I've seen 50% of the screen or something like that for a couple of seconds. Are you accounting like for like, or do you discount, or do you index, or how are you currently doing it?
I don't think it's a case of necessarily creating one metric that you can compare them all for. I think you have to recognise the realities of each individual medium and the attention that you're going to get across all of them, and you have to do certain things with your creative in a Facebook environment where the volume's not going to be on when you're going to get like an average of a second of people's attention, versus TVC, which still has ad avoidance, but it's a little bit different. So I'm not sure there's necessarily a numbers answer to that, but it's sort of recognizing that not all channels are viewed and consumed the same way, and you have to create a media plan that is also as integrated as it can be, so all those parts work together.
Couldn't agree more. That's a very good answer. I've really enjoyed this. I think we've covered on pretty much everything that I really want to talk about, unless you think that there's anything I've kind of missed. Is there anything that you really wanted to get through today?
What are you up to, Zach? We've spoken all about myself.
What am I up to? I suppose the audience may want to know. At the moment, I've just finished a 3-year, they call it postdoctoral research fellow.
Yep.
So that's the first 3 years outside of finishing your PhD. That actually finishes in March for me, March 8th, I think, to be specific. And then I continue as a research fellow. So the Institute, Byron and Elka, and the other directors have given me another 3-year contract. So they haven't kicked me out just yet. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
Cheers. We've now moved away from, we used to have researchers like me and Kathy Newen, Bill Page, Stephen Dunn. We used to have these people who integrate in the classroom as well. So I used to run a marketing strategy course that's been pulled from my workload. So none of us are now doing any sort of teaching at all, which means it frees up a lot more of our time to integrate and work with our the Ehrenberg Bass Institute sponsors. It also means we can work a little bit more on our academic publications as well. I'm really excited in that sense. I do like teaching. All the aspects you said that were great about teaching, I'm going to miss. I'm not going to miss the marking side of things. You know, reading the same thing 60 times is not enjoyable. And you do very much appreciate the high quality students because they make it so nice. But we still get to do some guest lectures. And I've been likening this to, I get to be the fun uncle. Like I can show up, I can play with the kids, I can give them noogies, I can like wrestle with them or like play tea parties or whatever. And then when they shit their pants, I can give them back to their parents.
Good analogy, yeah.
Yeah, and then that's pretty much what I get to do. I get to come in for 2 hours, talk about my topic, and then someone else has to clean up the mess. It's going to be great.
That's good. Yeah.
Apart from that, I think my personal life's going really well. You met my new girlfriend
Yes.
at Steve's wedding.
Yes.
So things are
Hello,
going
Steve,
very,
if
very
you're
well.
watching.
Yeah, he told me he would tune in. He
Yeah.
gave you a question, I think, which was moving from provider to research commissioner.
Good question.
Revamped the summer vac program that you and I did.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's now completely different.
Yep.
So with John, Byron, Kirsty and Alicia, you wouldn't know Alicia. We've made it so it used to be one student, maybe 1 or 2 supervisors for one topic. It was 8 weeks and it was full time. We've now changed it to one primary researcher, which is me. There's 3 topics and there's 10 students and they work in teams on each topic. And they have a whole bunch of other supervisors like John or Byron or Jenny or Ari, and there's about 20 other people that teach them individual skills. So I'm across the whole thing and I have to make sure it all comes together, which is a huge responsibility. And everyone else, they get to be the fun uncles and aunties in this situation, and I have to clean up the poo when it happens, which it happens, right? Because it's the first time we run this program this way. And things that you just unforeseen happening actually occur. You don't know how long it's going to take them to learn how to do brand performance measures from scratch. How long is it going to take them to learn a different type of skill in Excel or SPSS or something like that? So that's been really fun. And I think when we repeat it next year, we'll obviously have learned all of the kinks out of it. And I have to give this group of students a lot of credit. They have huge resilience, and Kirsty's done a very good job of recruiting them. And they're basically the future of the Institute when you think about it. So they will then go on to hopefully do a Masters by Research and either like you head out into industry and do very, very well, or like Chris Villani who did the same thing, or there's so many people now who have left the Institute and are just kicking ass. Like it's so good to see. Or they'll continue and do a PhD and end up working for us. We're growing, the Institute's growing, which is kind of nice. It's a good place to be. And so, I kind of felt a little bit under pressure, but privileged position that they've entrusted the 10 people who would end up being a whole cohort of master's students under my freaking guidance. You've made a good decision.
That sounds very exciting.
It is going well. We're almost at the end of the second week. So they'll give their second presentation tomorrow. And then we'll build them up, and then they give a presentation to the entire institute at the end. And I'm super pumped for them. I think people will be surprised at what they've achieved in what ends up being about 23 days. They'll produce some base level research that would be the equivalent of maybe a master's thesis.
Wow.
In 23 days. I know there's 10 of them, but these are fresh undergrads. You're talking like first year undergrads. Like,
wow.
Yeah, I keep repeating to them that when they're in my position, if they continue an academic career, they should really make me look like a joke. Because I was not doing this stuff when I was in their position. I was doing it during my honours year. So they're 3 years ahead of me.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's all the cool stuff happening here. I love it here. It's a good place. It's challenging. It gives you just enough freedom so that you can explore your own interests, but you obviously get the support of being here. And did you ever meet Lara Stocky?
Yeah.
She's back.
Oh, great.
So she had an interesting journey. She went to Loughborough University in the UK, and then she went to Flinders University just down the road, and she's back now. So she's working for us 40-40-20. She's taking over like the digital marketing sort of space, and she's a freak. Like she's pumping out high quality publications. She's supervising extremely well and is teaching like a demon. I'm super impressed with Lara.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So I usually like to end these interviews not on me, because no one's actually tuning in for me, Julian.
It's your show.
It's
actually like the Joe Rogan experience of marketing science, isn't it?
Maybe one day. Downloads are increasing, which is good. Someone told me that they listen to it because they find my voice quite soothing, and so they listen to it at night as a podcast that listen to going to sleep.
I mean, a radio voice is an interesting quality to have, I suppose. That's So
we'll
it's better
see.
than a grating voice that they want to turn off straight away.
Oh, that's true. I mean, there's some podcasts out there that I listen to that I'm like, the topic's really interesting, but I just can't stand the host's voice, and I just give up. Yeah. And I'm sure people don't like my voice. There's probably plenty of them, but that's totally cool. That's fine. So I just thought like we'd end up on some good notes and focusing back on you. So these summer vacs, right? So summer vacation scientists, there's 10 of them. I told them to give me questions for you. They didn't. So they're all actually in trouble tomorrow morning.
Right.
But some of them are heading into, some of them will probably end up heading into industry. Some of them will head into academia. What would your advice be for them? You know, they're like first year undergraduate students. What skills should they build up? What sort of network should they build? What are the key tips you would like to give them to hopefully one day have a very successful career?
Gosh, what a question. I would say a university experience has an incredible array of opportunities available to you. And, uni has to be fun as well as work, but I would say try to take advantage of as many of those opportunities as possible. I probably didn't do enough of that. And the one thing that I did take up was the summer vacation scholarship, which has sort of impacted what I have ultimately, ended up in with a career in research. But leverage everything that's available to you. Marketing degrees are really interesting in that you get a little bit of a taste of so many different sides of things: advertising, media planning, research. Really think about what sort of areas interest you. If an area does interest you, think about what opportunities might be available to you whilst you're still studying. Even if that's in a slightly different field. So, Ehrenberg Bass, I suppose, is a good example. If you're interested in, media planning, research is one area that you can get experience in that whilst, being at uni. I'm not sure if I have a great answer to this question, Zach, because
no, I thought that was good.
Just make the most of the opportunity. Make as much of it as you can whilst having a good time, because you're only in that sort of stage of life once, you want to look back on it with fond memories as well, and not just head down in books and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. So some of the master students at the moment on their lunch break, they play, it's like a 10-minute version of Monopoly. I don't know what it's called, Monopoly Quick or who knows. And then it just reminded me that we used to play that memory card game.
Yeah.
I actually have it in my drawer now somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. Matching pairs. Do you remember this?
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
We used to play this at lunchtime. We weren't quite as sophisticated as Monopoly, but
we had too much time on our hands.
maybe. Well, we were matching pairs and then we were matching data later, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll show them this clip tomorrow. They'll see an exclusive little first clip
wonderful.
of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the last thing I always ask people is anything that you'd like to give in terms of life advice or mottos that you live by or something that you think you want people to take away from this interview. Oh, and also if people do want to find you, whether you have any social media accounts or anything that you want people to follow you on, you can just say, I don't want you to follow me, leave me alone, or whatever. So
yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. Occasionally post updates on that.
So it's just Julian Major?
Yeah. I think I'm the only. I think there's a college football player that's also Julian Major, but there's not that many around. So
I like having a unique. Yeah, the unique name helps for sure.
Advice. I would say. I say this coming from a research perspective. The field is full of people who are, introverted and often work in environments that have lots of loud personalities. So I would say as advice, put yourself out there, be confident. Don't be the person, whether it's in your university tutorial or when you get your first job, that is sort of in the corner, not speaking up, not giving an opinion. Occasionally you'll say something silly, but that'll be a minority of all the times that you say something. And I think so much what affects how you get ahead or get noticed or get opportunities is just, speaking up, being present, having that, outward confidence, even if it's sort of goes against the nature of the person that you are. But that's something that I often think about. I remember early on at GFK or could have been somewhere else, there was always the view of if you get invited along to a client meeting, first of all, I'll preface this by saying don't speak for the sake of speaking, but you should walk out there having contributed something. So you shouldn't be in that room. If you're in that room, you're in there for a reason. Say something meaningful, contribute, ask a question, be present in that room, not just sitting there. So I think that's really important for marketing students because it is a field with loud voices, and loud voices can often win out rather than evidence of good thinking. So play the game. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's really good advice, Julian. So I really appreciate you. I mean, you spent almost maybe 2 hours with us, right? Yeah. So I really, really appreciate that. And I very much look forward to when I'm probably going to go the Grampians. That would please you. I think it's for two reasons. The wine region, and I've heard it's also gorgeous for hiking.
Yes.
So I'm super excited about going.
Yep.
And like you said, it's close to this South Australian border. So if there is something to do with COVID, we can come back pretty quick.
Yeah.
So we don't get locked out or have to quarantine.
Yeah. Our borders are open, Zac. SA and Vic, we're good to go. So come all the way to Melbourne. Why not?
I will. As soon as I have the next, my next holiday is going to be Victoria. It's going to be Grampians. I can't wait.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't wait till I can come back to the Melbourne CBD and visit you, and you're going to show me some of the suburbs.
Yeah.
I want to see the suburbs around because, I watch a lot of AFL and I'm like, I know all of the clubs, but I haven't been to like Richmond or Hawthorn or anything. So it's hard for me to really feel the club's culture because I've never even been to the suburb.
Yeah, well, I live in Richmond, so I'll show you around, the good local spots, the Dustin Martin murals.
Are you close to Punt Road?
Yeah, not too far. Yeah.
Amazing. I can't wait. Yeah, thanks again, Julian. I've really had a good time.
No worries.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey guys, it's Zac Anesbury here with just a couple of quick reminders. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, then make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. There are plenty more interviews to come with some of the world's leading marketing academics and practitioners. You do not want to miss these. In the meantime, if you're looking for another way to connect, then follow me on Twitter at Zac Anesbury. That is ZACANESBURY for my take on the marketing issues of the day.